welcome to Spirit Coffee Talk. My name is Lisa Richmond. I have Elyse and Ginette joining me today, as always, for our Friday meetings, get-togethers, where we discuss all things spirit, what's kind of going on in the spiritual realm here on Earth to do with it, what our individual journeys are, what the collective journeys are, and we discuss everything in between. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we are kind of exploring the concept or idea of having multiple existence or multiple timelines happening at once. And I know that can kind of sound like it is a concept that isn't talked about much or felt or explored much, but there's a lot of information about this actually. And I find it fascinating. And I love that we're digging into something like this because, to be honest, it's been coming up a lot lately. And what this can kind of look like is even the concept of having really vivid dreams about something else where it's your existence, but you're completely experiencing something else that we might just, brush off as just a strange dream with a bunch of strangers, or visions or internal knowings, or getting some feedback on something that is not quite your current, this place and time existence of how we see it in this kind of dimension. So with that, I would love for my ladies to help me in explaining this and kind of like your experience with this and what Spirit has brought forward and why this is coming up right now.
All right, Elyse, take us off.
Elyse, go.
Here you go. So as you were introing Lisa, I was like, what do I think about this? Because we hadn't really talked too much in advance that we were going to chat about this. And so I was like, oh, what do I think? What do I feel? And then, what Spirit, and I was like, I'm curious how this conversation is going to go, because I think this is a big topic, and I think different people are going to have different views and understandings of what this looks like. For me, what kind of came through, I kind of just let Spirit do it because my brain was like, ew, there's so many things to consider. Was we need to understand that there are infinite Earth realities playing out at any time. So my sense, and I feel like it would really be tricky for this to happen, is like if Elyse incarnation A is over here in Canada and Elyse carnation B is over living in New Zealand, the ramifications of crossing paths in this reality, I think, would be super mucky. What's coming up for me is this idea of there are different incarnations of us, different soul fragments, different experiences, living different lives out in the cosmos on some random planet, who the heck knows where, and also on different versions of Earth. So I think for me, the underpinning of this conversation is there are infinite realities that can be existing on Earth at any given time. So I don't know if I'm going to walk down the street and bump into another version of myself in this reality, but I could in another reality. And I think this is where deja vu comes from, is my thought of ooh, I've been here before, because maybe in a different reality, an aspect of me was here before. Does that make sense?
Very interesting. Yeah.
It's a tricky one to articulate, all of it. My brain is really what do I want to say?
So I'm going to take this one step further and share an experience, because I very much, in my realm of believe in parallel timelines, different timelines. I've had dreams. We've talked about it on SDT before. I've had dreams of another version of myself that I was witnessing that was very similar, same husband, same kids. But in that one, I was 7 months pregnant with a third child that does not exist in this reality here, right? So I've had those. But here's where it goes a little deeper. I had an experience when I was in grade 8, I believe. And we had this news, she wasn't a substitute. It was she was getting her graduation stuff to be a teacher. You know that last year? I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
She was a student teacher. Yeah. Yes, the practicum. Thank you. She was working with our teacher at the time. And she walked in and she had dark hair. I have dark hair, so okay, fair. But there was something, and I couldn't articulate it until only a year ago. This random event. I remember looking at her. She was shorter than me, and I was like watching myself, but not the me in the classroom, but watching myself. And I was like, I don't understand that. I'm like, I guess I'm going to be like her when I grow up, is what I thought, right? But Spirit, in one of my meditations, took me back to that experience a little while back. And they're like, do you know how you recognized her different than anyone you've ever recognized before? And they were showing me that she was another soul aspect. Like, you know, that pie, the whole higher self pie, one piece of the pie comes down as Ginette, or, you know, as Lisa and Elyse, and then goes back up. But other pieces can come down in different, completely different expressions, but there's a soul resonance and recognition when it recognizes that soul fragment. And that essentially, that's what I was recognizing back in grade 8 before I had any ability to even understand what it was another version of my soul essence in form. And that it was interesting and a rarity to cross paths, but there's a recognition there. So I'd be curious for anyone that's watching, kind of like that feeling of deja vu where your body just lights up and you know something. But my question to those watching is, have you ever met someone, even if it was in passing, like say at a coffee shop and you bumped into them and you looked at them and you're like, almost like looking at yourself, even if it doesn't look the same? I'd be curious if there was data on it. How many people have experienced that degree of parallel?
That's incredible.
Right? Isn't it weird to think?
Next level compassion, man.
Totally.
Have you guys heard or done any research on individuals that have experienced an alternate kind of life where they've gone to sleep and 40 years later, they wake up, really, it was just overnight. But they literally lived an alternate life and they woke up and they're that same 20-year-old the next day, and they are leaving then a life that they just experienced. Like I heard this woman tell her story. It started when she was pregnant, giving birth to this baby. She's like, I felt everything. Like I gave birth, I raised him. And on his 40th birthday, like every single day, even the mundane days, I woke up.
Yes.
And like her longing for her son and her life, like, could you imagine?
I couldn't, but I believe that. I absolutely believe that.
I
Now,
know. And there's some people who have snippets of that. There's some people who astral travel in order to be able to experience and see another soul aspect of themselves that's playing out in another situation here on earth, different time period. You know, I had an experience of going in, and I was a man in it would have been like 80s, and what he was experiencing, and it was like insane. And I mean, obviously I wasn't a man in the 80s, you know what I mean? But like, I felt him, I walked, I could smell, I could taste, and like the emotions that he was feeling. And then when I came back into it, it was like a hypnotic state. And then when I came back into it, I was like, oh my God, like, what am I to learn with that? My guides really helped me to play out what it was that I was experiencing in that reality that was mirroring an aspect of self. And that's why I had to experience it. But it was, they showed it exactly, an overlaying higher self, that overlaying soul. And then aspects or pieces that has gone in at different times and and then joined together in some, departed, brought in, you know. And it's not like we have one soul that's like a piece of Play-Doh, comes into your human life, and then when you die, it goes up, learns, and it's like infinite aspects of yourself in infinite realities and timelines.
I even heard a story of a man who, I've heard several like this, but this was the most recent, where a man was, he woke up and everything seemed a little bit different in his reality, and he couldn't quite figure out what it was. But he went on with his day. It was like a weekend or something, so it's not like he had to go to work. But he ran into a boy of about 5 years old, and then recognized that the boy was him when he was 5. So he suddenly,
Oh.
as embodied though, was back in time somehow in like a glitch in the matrix. And then I wish I remember the story more clearly, but then found himself back in his own reality. But he actually physically, tangibly crossed paths with his own
With
5-year-old
himself.
self. So
Oh.
he moved through time, not necessarily
I
timelines.
feel like it would go grab me and hug me and be like, everything's gonna be okay.
Right.
Okay, so
love
this
you.
brings up such an interesting point. Well, so two things. What you were just speaking to was when we talk about in like psychology or self-development work, there's this idea of like inner child work, and people think like, no, I'm going back and I'm healing the trauma, which like, yes,
Massively powerful.
and there's a lot to say that time is not one directional. It's not linear. It is a circle. And so when we are bumping into, and that's why I was saying, like, I don't think that this meat suit version of me, I'm going to see on the other side of the earth experiencing the exact same things, because it goes to the bigger conversation of our soul is not who we are. This like meat suit Elyse with the hair and the face and the whatever, that is like one of a trillion variations. We're not going to reincarnate in the exact same way because it's infinite, right? Like the likelihood of it being carbon copied to another life on, in the exact same way, exact same age, but to see older versions or younger versions of ourselves, when you're doing that like inner child healing work, you're going back and connecting with that part of self that exists. It's not gone, right? We think of it as like a mind construct, and to a degree it can be, because I think it can help heal our mind and heal our energy and our trauma in our current meat suit on this date and time. But it also goes back and heals that
aspect
earlier version.
Yes.
That still exists. It's not gone. It's just outside of our like little teensy scope right now.
And actually within our current incarnation, you can actually see the difference in brain connection made after doing the work. It's as if that dendritic connection, the neural pathways are redefined based on the work that you can do in that period of time. And it's real. Like I studied the brain, and this is one of the biggest things that like hit me, because it's used in therapy all the time. I use it with clients all the time, going back and talking to that aspect of self. But really, it is allowing yourself to recreate or bring yourself into that aspect or that time period in order to do and rewire the connections that were wired that way once, that you know what I mean. So there is a science with this. There's a very physicality, but there's also, like you said, time is not linear. We're not like, okay, we have to walk. I use that like walking down the timeline back, but it's actually allowing yourself to experience the timeline frequency and be able to heal and realign from that point forward, which legitimately changes your trajectory of your current perception.
Isn't it amazing then to think how much then that helps us realize that all things are connected.
100%.
All things, timelines, time in space are all connected at any one point, meaning we could then, like this man did, jump to technically another time in which he's seeing his younger version. Or we could recognize and cross paths with another version of ourselves. Or we can move into a parallel timeline, whether it be in dream state or astral state. Everything is totally connected and can be moved, just like the brain, like you're saying, those dendritic connections. They don't move just linearly. They're connected in every which way.
They're all wired in
it's a web.
Yes, it is.
The web of life.
Very much.
There we go.
Is. It very much is. in very much in the similar way that when you can see the actual energetic connections from the trees down into the earth to each other, from the animals and the plants and the humans, and this, when you can start to see those energetic connections, it looks like the neural pathways of connection within us then take more from us into the, earth, cosmos, and to each other. It's all connected on this unbelievable web that is all interconnected in all facets.
Yeah.
So two things can happen. You can feel overwhelmed and very insignificant in the first place, or you can also feel so incredibly powerful because you are aligned with all things. And that you are not separate from, you are one, and that you can experience and embrace and embody all things of everything. And that interconnectiveness is what is life force in non-linear way.
Absolutely.
And so I think it'd be interesting if we allow, like, if I say, okay, I'm going to say to anybody watching, you can actually do this. So Spirit was talking to me on like a cool little meditation that you can do with yourself. So when you have the time to sit down and have that time with yourself, connect, sit down, ground yourself in, attach yourself through to all that is, and really have the intention of connecting yourself to all that is and that interconnectedness of all. And ask your guides and your higher self and all aspects of self to come forward and allow you to experience or see or even have a glimpse of understanding into a alternate timeline or a perspective or something that is influential for you right now in allowing you to understand this, where you are currently, and how it can affect you and help you to bring you into your, highest state of vibration, let's say. Okay, if that's the intention. And then they will allow you to open up that mind's eye, that internal knowing, to see and experience, whether it's through smell, sight, feeling, embrace. They will allow you. And as the consciousness continues to raise, this will become more and more available for people. That's why we're talking about it, because they want us to, so that we can learn from ourselves, our interconnectedness of all things that is. And so that people can start to see that there's so much more outside of just what this is right here. So ask your guides, ask the aspect of self to come in and help you to see, experience, and have that sense of knowing, to understand more on a personal level of what we're talking about. Spirits like tell them to do it because they are able to do it.
I agree. We're coming into an ability that is unlimited.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
And I really would love to hear feedback on this from anyone that does it. Like, put it in the comments below, visit our Facebook page, on Avalon Facebook page, community page, and like, let's talk about this, experiences, stories that you've heard, because what that does is it allows for more expansion. Our ability to learn and grow and perceive more and ascend into that higher level consciousness, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
There's a couple older Netflix shows that I feel like do a really cool job of embodying this. One of them, it's a little less so on this, but it's really beautiful on how interconnected we can be. And it's called Sense8 is the one. I was like one of the OG Netflix shows.
Oh,
Sense8. It's really good. You should watch it.
Okay.
But the second one that caught me so off guard, and it's pretty intense, but it like was mind bending, is the OA. Like,
oh yes, I forgot about it.
And then O and A.
Lisa, you have to watch it too.
Talking
the
about
the OA. Yeah.
like letters O and A. And it's about, you don't really see it at first, and you kind of have to commit to a little bit of time with it.
Yeah.
It's a ride. Like, you're kind of like, I don't know, because it gives you these sneaks of the idea, but as the show progresses, it talks deeply about parallel realities and parallel lives and our ability to access that. And it's It's a really incredible show. I don't think they like really tied it off at the end, which kind
No,
of
they
makes me sad.
didn't. Yeah,
Yeah, because it was one of the original ones, and I think it was a little before its time, to be honest. I don't
probably.
feel that like this type of conversation was as active at that time because it was
Yeah.
quite old. But it's a really good show. Like
Okay.
at one point, she's like
Yeah.
talking to an octopus or something
Yeah.
like this giant. It's weird, but it's like when you have this lens of it, you're like, oh shit! Like it's
Yeah.
a really well done show. So
Okay.
would recommend. It's a bit intense though. So like you
Yeah.
need to I had to take breaks for some of the episodes because it's
Yeah.
like not scary, but just like
I'm really
Mind
sensitive
bending.
to any intensity at all. Like
there's
my
it's
Mm.
limit
not
is like house hunters.
Yeah, it's
yeah, it's
not
not
like Stranger Things intense kind of thing.
no.
It's just like mind bending. But I mean, you really could start with Sense 8 then. I
Mhm,
mean, that has its own kind of intensities later on too, but
mhm,
um they're neat though. They're like I found it at least satisfying to my mind to
mhm.
know that others out there are thinking in this expanded way at the time, right?
I
Again,
love
now
that.
it's more commonplace, but I remember at the time being like, ah, thank you. Even like the
Mhm.
movie, what was the movie with Scarlett Johansson? Um, what was the name of the first Homo erectus or something that they found? Lucy, the movie Lucy. Scarlett Johansson's in it.
She's
And
so
she
good.
essentially begins to, something happens to her. I won't give it all away. Little intense in the beginning, little FYI, but it sets the stage as to why she gains all knowledge of creation in it.
I don't think I've
And
seen that.
yeah, it's really neat. And I remember thinking, like, I mean, I've had snippets, tiny little, like one Lego piece compared to the entire thing of understanding creation. But I could recognize pieces in that movie of like, other people are thinking of this. And not that it's exactly that movie, is not what I'm saying, but it was neat to see and has been neat to see the progression, even the show Manifest on Netflix too,
Yeah.
of people talking about or creating shows about the interconnectedness of all things.
Yeah.
And again, take the shows and details with a
And
grain of
even
salt
like I
to,
didn't
right?
watch it,
Like,
but isn't it kind of like everything all at once?
oh,
Mhm.
that one
Everything
too.
everywhere
Yeah,
all at once. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's another one.
And like
Yeah.
even the new Spider-Man and all the different Spider-Verses. I
Yeah.
watched that with my son and I'm like, he's like, Mama, I really think that you're gonna like it. It's really awesome. They go to different like universes and different realities. And I'm like, okay, I want to watch this. And I watched it, I'm like, this is
Piqued my interest.
amazing.
Yeah.
I think Doctor
I was
Strange.
just gonna say Doctor Strange too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a like Marvel
Number
or
one
whatever
is
that
the
is.
best.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not like a superhero-y, like I don't love a lot of the superhero movies. But yeah, someone was like, "No, you need to watch that one." And I remember
Yeah.
being like, "Oh,
Yeah.
interesting." It's and that's what
Oh,
I think is
that's
so
so
cool is
fun.
that we can feel so like, "Oh, I don't believe in that stuff." And da 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 and like everybody's entitled to their opinion, totally fine. And yet there's so many ways in which we are consuming these ideas and they are embedded in
Totally.
so many things more so than what we would even
Mhm.
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you could take it on a positive spin or you can take it in a negative spin. Again, there's your choice within all
Yeah.
movies.
Mhm.
But there is, like you're saying, I totally agree. There's rooting of consciousness,
Definitely.
like the change in consciousness, which is so neat. So,
One last one, but it's a little tricky to find, but if you ever do find it, it used to be on Netflix, so it might be on another streaming service now. But I Origin, like the letter I Origin. Or no, is it EYE, like eyeball, because it's about eyeballs and window to the soul. And it's a
oh,
really beautiful movie about like soul connections and how our souls can show up in other
And how you remember it through
beings.
their
And
eyes. Isn't that
yes.
something that
Oh,
just like,
it gives me chills even just thinking about that movie. It's so
oh,
good.
that has happened to me so much lately. Like I've seen I told you like that more personal story of like I was watching this very public figure on TV and I don't give a rip about like, oh, if someone's famous, and I certainly do not follow like professional athletes because for me I'm like, oh, but that's just my own judgment. Anyway, but I saw like his eyes and I was like, there was this deep remembering, this deep knowing, and then all of a sudden I got a flash of like all this stuff around him and like what, and then it happened, and it's all happening in front of me, and I can't stop looking at his eyes and having this crazy understanding of his path. I'm like, why things are happening and what's going on. And I'm like, this like very, very public figure, professional athlete, and it's the eyes. And inside, I'm like, and I don't tell a lot of people because they're like, as if little Canadian girl knows this like very public athlete. But I do, because I know his soul. There is a deeper memory. There's an aspect of myself that I'm connecting with and I'm understanding and either communicating with or something. But that deep knowing and that origin just through his eyes.
The eyes, totally. Spirit is often said, like, notice the eyes. It'll be in the eyes. That like truths, resonance, all of that, which is why eye contact is so valuable with people. Like when we don't look people in the eyes anymore, well, I actually think that's changing. I think more people are starting to look in people's eyes again because they're wanting to innately recognize the soul connections in people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, eye contact is very vulnerable. And I think as we start to kind of take off some of those walls that we have up from all of the million things and reasons, it becomes easier to access that. It's so interesting too, as Lisa, as you were talking, I had intuitions about meeting my partner for years before I met him, and I knew of him but didn't know him. But one of the like biggest, I had a dream and I watched us like our love story and us falling in love, and they wouldn't show me his face because of course I would have been like hunting on the internet trying to, who is this guy? And so they didn't show me, but they showed me his eyes very specifically. And I remember waking up and being like, holy, and even thinking like, oh, like that's not normally my type. Da, da, da. And like, of course your brain just like overanalyzes whatever. But I remember when I met him, as soon he walked up into the room, it was like a birthday party, and we locked eyes, and I was like, holy shit. And I didn't even recognize the eyes because he was way across the room. So it wasn't close enough that I could be like, those are the ones from the dream. But same thing, there's this resonance of like, oh. And I think that is where we have coined the term like love at first sight. I don't necessarily know that it's love at first sight in the traditional sense that our brains define love. I think it's like that universal love, that soul connection, that like, because it can happen with friends. I swear to God, my dog Dexter. Like he was my little soulmate, man. I loved him like with my whole heart. So it's like that idea of love at first sight is that remembering of the universal love through 100%. Soul connections, which is just such a cool way to look at it.
Yeah, I agree.
I love it.
Cool. All
right.
That was a very fun topic.
That was fun.
So I'm very curious to see how people resonate with this. And stories, come forward and let us know all about it, because I love this. But it was so good to meet again today, and it was good to see you ladies. And thank you everybody for tuning in and taking part in this fun project that we're doing with Spirit Coffee Talk. And I just love it. It brings so much joy and love in my heart. So thank you so much for meeting today, and we will see you next week.
All right, everyone.